Welcome to One Big Boat. We're all in this together. A show focused on people and organizations whose work is making a true difference in people's lives. Today, we welcome Susan Ross, the Executive Director of Second Step.
One of the myths out there is that domestic violence is only that black eye or only the things that we can see.
She's on board to talk about where victims of domestic violence can go for help. That's next on One Big Boat. We're all in this together. If people come across Second Step, it could be high school advancement, it could be anything. What is Second Step?
That's a good question because there actually is another Second Step in the area that's a dance studio, and there's another one that is physical therapy. So the Second Step is a domestic violence agency based in Newton, serving all of Eastern Massachusetts. We got our name from a group of volunteers who were working at an emergency domestic violence shelter. And at the time, in the late 80s, there was a time limit on how long somebody could stay in one of those shelters. And after about 60 days, what these volunteers noticed was that people were leaving the shelter and going right back home to the dangerous situation. And they did that because 60 days really is not long enough to get your life back in order, to recover from trauma, to figure out the legal problems you have, to get a job, figure out all of the pieces you need to be independent and safe. And so the volunteers said, well, people have taken this really hard first step and they've left the abusive relationship. There has to be a second step for them. And so Second Step emerged as, at the time, a transitional living shelter where somebody could stay for up to 2 years and do all those things that they needed to do. We have since evolved into often being somebody's first step, where people come for crisis intervention and safety planning and all of the wraparound services we provide now.
And how many rooms do you have now?
So we actually we're not operating the shelter anymore.
Okay.
We've entered into an agreement with Family Aid, which is the leading family homelessness organization in the Boston area. And they're managing our day-to-day shelter, which houses 9 families. And we're providing the domestic violence related targeted services for their clients as well as clients in the community.
How do people find you?
People come to us a number of ways. We get a lot of referrals from the court system, from the police departments, from the hospitals, schools, private social workers or therapists, word of mouth, friends.
Yeah. So when they first call you, is it simply just, I need a place to stay? Or do I need legal action? Can you provide that?
It's a real range of things. We have an intake line, and we have a trained advocate who does sort of triage. And so often people don't know what they need. They know that they're in trouble, but they don't actually know what they need or what's available to them. So she will really talk with people about their situation and help them identify the different pieces that they might need to help. We get people who call who might say, I don't know if this is domestic violence, but something doesn't feel right. We often will get calls from people who maybe heard a presentation or a training and a red flag went off and they thought, is this dangerous? And they'll call to try to, just kind of suss that out, all the way to people who have fled the night before, are in emergency shelter, or looking for a restraining order so that they can leave safely, or people who maybe have been out of the relationship for a little while and now are ready to file for divorce and child support and custody. So it's really somebody all along the spectrum of the experience, and we really help people kind of make sense of it and guide them through the process so they understand what services are available and what might be helpful to them.
Yeah, somebody may think, well, okay, there's a bruise under an eye, and so, I fell. And okay, that's obvious, there might be domestic abuse there. But what constitutes it? Could it also be just somebody who has total control over somebody? Could it be something through the computer, like, their social media? What is domestic abuse?
It's a great question. And I think one of the myths out there is that domestic violence is only that black eye or only the things that we can see. And in fact, it's a pattern of coercive control where an intimate partner really is trying to maintain control and power over the other person. So that can take the form of verbal abuse, name calling, harassment, berating, threats to do harm. It can be emotional abuse. It can be sexual abuse. It can be financial abuse. That's in almost every case, financial abuse is present where somebody does not have access to money or funds. They're on, very limited allowance. And it's obviously that's a way to control somebody if they don't have any money to leave or do anything independently. Immigration is a tool of abuse where if somebody is not a U.S. citizen, they can threaten to call ICE. They can threaten to turn them in. It's something that makes people hesitant to call the police. So it's, an abuser might know that they can get away with more because somebody's not going to call the police because they're afraid of immigration consequences. The psychological, the coercion, the financial, all of those kinds of abuse are often lead to the physical abuse. The physical abuse is usually not the first thing that happens. And that's, so there are other signs that people can be aware of, whether it's in their own relationship or if it's in a loved one or a friend, to see, is somebody being isolated? Is it hard to spend time with that person? Do they seem like they're walking on eggshells, always afraid of kind of getting in trouble, or need to always check in and tell somebody where they are? So all of that is domestic violence. And you sort of referred to technology kinds of things where people might be posting things on social media, or they might have a tracker on somebody's car, or we've had clients now where, you can control so much of the climate and in like your house remotely. So somebody who might turn off the heat or turn on the heat or turn off the lights or turn on the lights and, really be emotionally and psychologically abusive that way and kind of controlling somebody's environment.
Yeah, I think in the state in June of 2024, they passed a coercive control law that allows expands the definition of abuse.
Yeah, and it codifies the definition of abuse. So something we've known in the field for a long time, that those kinds of coercive behaviors are very much part of domestic violence, but the law didn't recognize that. And so what that would mean in practice is, if you're going to get a restraining order, for example, you need to show that you're in reasonable fear of imminent bodily harm. And that was often sort of seen to be, well, is somebody going to hurt you now? Are they going to punch you?
The black eye.
The black eye, exactly. This codification has now allowed people to bring into court evidence of these other kinds of coercive behaviors, and for a judge to give that credit and weight to go towards the determination of whether or not somebody needs a restraining order. So it's like anything new, people are trying to work out all of the nuances and what that looks like, but it is, I think, a big step in the right direction of our understanding and our response to domestic violence.
Some of the numbers I have, and let me know if they're right or wrong, but it's essentially 1 in 3, male and female, are victims. So your coworker sitting next to you every day, you may not even know.
That's right. It's an astounding statistic that people, can't quite make sense of. And I think that's when it's really important to understand that it's not just the black eye, because it's easy to say, I work with 25 people. I've never seen somebody come in with a black eye. This can't be true. But when you expand the definition and expand the awareness of what that is, you actually it is true. And if you're a little bit more aware, kind of can notice how some of those things could be so.
And the population we haven't even talked about yet, the kids.
Yeah. It's a cycle. It's a cycle of abuse. And so when kids are exposed to that, they are traumatized. That trauma has a ripple effect through the community in terms of their behavior in school, their ability to, participate in other activities. It's what then they learn about how relationships work, what love looks like. And if we don't stop it, that's when kids then are either vulnerable to being abused or to being abusive. And really our one of our main goals at the second step is to stop that cycle and to help families stop the cycles for the benefit of their kids.
What education do you have for kids, or what programs can they be put in? If not at second step, where can you place them? Because I realize you can't work as a silo.
Right. We can't work as a silo, and we are working hard to be really part of the community. So we have a couple of prevention programs. One aspect of that is really working in schools with young people about safe, healthy relationships. And we don't do this, but schools are starting to talk about that as early as kindergarten, about how to be a nice person, how to manage your feelings, how to respond in conflict. And then as kids get older and it's more age appropriate, we can start having the conversation about what does that look like in an intimate or romantic or dating relationship. We do some of that in schools. We have a club at Newton North where we work with the students there to build awareness, to train peer educators so that they can help their fellow students. We also do a lot of work just out in the community in general, trying to make sure that, for example, parents understand what to look for in a relationship. If you see that your child is constantly texting their boyfriend or girlfriend and need to know where they are, and if you're not sort of aware of what that could mean, you might think like, oh, that's young love. Oh, they're just they can't get enough of each other, which in fact may be true, but it also could be a sign that this is somebody who's a little too obsessed, who's trying to control the situation. Or you have a son or daughter who is getting those texts and doesn't know what to make of it. It's really important for parents to understand what some of these signs are and how to help their child on either end of that kind of extricate themselves. And then we really try to get into the community at large, into businesses, faith communities, anywhere people gather really, to let people know more about the signs of domestic violence, the warning signs, the reality, so that people know for themselves or for others that they can intervene, and that the second step and other organizations are available for help.
Coming up,
what are the patterns that you see in yourself that you don't want to repeat?
learning to steer clear of past situations. I bring this up. I've had a couple friends of mine, both that I always get in a relationship with a narcissist. And I'm always, like, well, what attracts you to that? And and is it just unfair for me to say that, or is it something maybe in their past?
Yeah.
Is it something that they can go to a support group? I mean,
Yeah, so we at the second step we have support groups for victims and survivors of domestic violence, and that's some of the things that they work on there. We have our team of advocates is led by a licensed social worker, and she has a team of advocates who have mental health backgrounds, and so they do support groups, and it's about sort of understanding what even is a narcissist, and maybe what are your patterns that not to blame anyone for being a victim of violence, but what are the patterns that you see in yourself that you don't want to repeat,
or some of the triggers some of the flags you may miss.
Exactly, the flags you may miss, and then you get into a relationship that turns into a dangerous one. So it's really about building awareness for people individually, and building skills and strengthening their rebuilding their self-esteem. Because if you've been in a domestic violence relationship, it is traumatizing. You doubt yourself. You don't know who to trust. There's all kinds of things that you need to rebuild so that you can be in another healthy relationship. And we see that. We see clients move on to another healthy relationship, and that's a really happy, joyful thing to.
This may be an unfair question, but is there anything for the abuser? So like we've done work with veteran groups, post-traumatic stress. Yeah. There are past histories that they unfortunately come forward.
Yeah.
So is there anything for you love somebody, but you can't be in that relationship because they're abusive? What can they do for that loved one?
Yeah, it's a totally fair question. It's a good question. And I think it's a direction that we have to head in, to understand that we are trying to really help family units be safer and healthier. And that includes everybody in that family unit. There are, I firmly believe that nobody wants to cause harm to somebody they love. If you're somebody who has caused harm or been abusive, and you are, looking for help because you want to not cause harm, you can call a Call for Change helpline. The number is 877-898-3411, and that's one way that people can get help if they're the abuser. And there are things called batterer intervention programs, which are generally only court ordered. It's not something that I think you can sign yourself up for, but there are programs and there are ways for people to understand what their triggers are, to understand that their pattern is wrong, and, to work on breaking that cycle for themselves as well.
So there's 1,000 things we can talk for a month.
Yeah.
Right? What am I missing? Because sometimes I look at this and I have a point of view, but maybe am I missing the trees kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that's really important is it goes to the, a little bit to the prevalence and the, 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 people. There's a myth that domestic violence only happens in certain places to certain people. And that's really not true. It crosses every single demographic, age, race, gender identity, religion, profession, socioeconomic class. And I think that's really important to recognize that this isn't something that happens to someone else or other people. It's happening in every neighborhood, in every zip code. And, so I think that's something that's important for people to know. I think it's important for people to know that it is, it's not inevitable, that domestic violence is something, and certainly, severe harm and fatalities are not inevitable. There are things that we can see, and there are responses available. So, one of the things that I get upset by is when, we'll hear in the news, or we don't hear in the news, about people who are killed by an intimate partner. And I feel like there's just a desensitizing to that horrific crime, and a tacit acceptance that that's going to happen. And I don't think we can accept that. I think we have to believe that we can see signs, that we can respond, and that we can prevent harm. Something, that people often, a myth that I think we've come a long way from is that domestic violence is a personal issue. And we've come a long way in making sure that we open the closed door, that it's not just happening inside a family, but that we as a society are saying, this is a community issue, this causes community harm, and we as a community are not going to stand for this. This isn't just between a husband and a wife, a girlfriend and a boyfriend. This is a harm to all of us if this is perpetuated. And I think, we've made a lot of headway in laws and policies to help with that, with defining domestic violence appropriately by having criminal penalties that reflect that, by the restraining order laws. But I do think that we have to be aware of what we tolerate as in our language, in our culture, in our pop culture, to really combat this.
When that pops up, in our stats, the stats that I have is 18 to 22 domestic violence episodes end in a homicide per year in Massachusetts. Yeah. But when something happens either on a national stage or a local athlete, and we don't want to go into specific cases because you don't know, but how do you look at that? I mean, do you feel like, it's being brushed under the table, or is it, do we spend enough time talking about it? Should we be talking about it because we won't know all the answers?
Yeah, I think that we have to talk about it. And I think we have to be prepared to say, we don't know exactly what's happened here, but this kind of thing, if true, is wrong. And I think we have to be really aware that, young people watch this. Young people are taking their cues from adults. So when you have a sports figure or a celebrity who's involved in something like this, I think we really have to give parents and trusted adults the tools and the language and the confidence to comment on it and to have a conversation with their kids and say, you probably have heard about so-and-so who's been accused of something. We don't know what actually happened, but let's talk about this. This is a serious thing, and it's not okay. I think sometimes people they like to rely on what happens in the legal system. And if somebody is found guilty in the legal system, then it happened. And if they're acquitted through the legal system, then it didn't happen. And I think that's an inaccuracy, and I'm a lawyer, so I appreciate the criminal justice system, and I've worked as an assistant district attorney, and I understand the process. But there's a difference between criminal liability and actual truth and facts. And so I think we can't let ourselves off the hook because somebody's not found guilty. We still have to have the hard conversation about what's been, the allegations that are out there. And it sends a message to young people. It sends a message to other survivors if we don't take it seriously. If we say, well, she took a week to report it, so it can't possibly be true, or they don't have pictures of any injury, so it can't be true. I think we have to...
Or they went back.
Right. And, the truth is that it is hard to report these things because you're afraid you're not going to be believed. It may not be safe because you think there might be retribution. It's understandable why somebody might not report it right away. And it's not because they're lying. It's because it's hard to report this. There's a lot of shame involved. Even though nobody is to blame for it happening, they think it is. A survivor thinks it's their fault. And so it's very difficult to move into the public and say, this happened to me. I need help. I need someone to hold this person accountable. So I think it's really important that people feel comfortable talking about this so that we don't sort of rely on the easy out. And so, we try at the second step, we try to bring to light when it happens with a public figure, just to sort of say that message. We know people are paying attention and we want people to have the information and the support.
Their antenna's up. How do people find you?
So they find us through referrals from other providers. They can find us on state websites with different resources. They can find us at our website, thesecondstep.org, social media. We're really trying to get our name out a lot more broadly so that people do know that they can come to us for help.
Well, I hope this helps a little.
I hope it does. Thank you so much. I'm sure it will.
One Big Boat is a production of Last Minute Productions Incorporated. This episode was produced by me, Jay Dobeck. Ryan Macheski was the sound engineer. Jim Johnson provided production support. And Joanne Pilata is the production coordinator.